Alex, when they tell you that you can get a VIP pass to go to a Halloween or a haunted house,
Hmm.
get the VIP pass. Get the VIP pass.
Why should I get the VIP pass,
You
Patrick?
should get the VIP pass because they hide the lines in
Hmm.
tents, so you don't actually know how long the line is until you go in, and you assume, well, these big tents, they must be things that you can do in there. They
Hmm.
must be attractions because I've already waited an hour in line for a ticket. I can't imagine that all of those things are lines inside. Because if you buy the VIP pass, you can bypass all of those lines.
Right.
But if you don't buy that, you realize that you were about to be herded into 3 different tents that account for another 2.5 hours of waiting, and it's you can't go back and be like, I'd like to upgrade to the VIP pass, and you've already spent the money on the pass, and now you need to wait in this line, and suddenly it's 12:45 and you're still not in the haunted house yet. Buy the VIP pass because
That's a
we
real bummer.
because we noticed at the end of it that if you'd bought in the VIP pass, you don't have to stand in any of that line. And this is
Yeah.
on top of other mistakes we made, which is we didn't buy the tickets online because I didn't know how many people were going, like until very close to when I was leaving. And so, well, whatever, you just buy them there. Or like I'll just, they got a mobile site. I'll just, buy them, in the car and we'll be done. But they don't let you. You can buy them online through your phone, but they will not scan them through your phone. You have to
What?
print them. And I think the reason they do that is because when I got there, the lines are so crazy. I think it's a form of crowd control. I think if everyone got there and then was purchasing it on their phone and was scanning them in line, the
Uh,
line that was already crazy long would be even longer if they were being convenient. So
oh,
their way
Jesus.
their way of getting, but it was awesome.
Yeah. So how was the haunted house
It was
itself? You went
great.
to a place that was like a little ways south of where you live, I think,
Yeah,
or
it's
a little bit
45.
out of town.
Yeah, it's like 45 minutes south, and it's called Statesville Prison. It's near this place called Joliet, Illinois, in the middle of effing nowhere. And it was good. Like, I mean, it wasn't just like people popping out. I mean, it was a lot of that because it's a haunted house, but
Hmm.
super high quality props. Like they had 2 different sections. They had a prison, sort of insane asylum sort of thing, and then the City of the Dead, which was like this cave-like structure. And it's just incredibly high quality props. You felt like you were going through movie sets.
Right.
I'm sure if you could actually see it in the night of day, like the light of day, it might look pretty cheap. But I'm sure that's how a lot of that stuff is, which is pretty ragtag. And they have this really great moment where one of the first things you come across is you walk in front of a school bus that they've shoved inside of their setup, and
Hmm.
there's one of the prison inmates hitting the horn and scaring the shit out of you as you walk by. And then when you loop around and you're finishing, like the last thing that you do is you walk through the bus and you get to watch the people that are coming through in front of the bus and watch those people get the shit scared out of them as the horn goes off.
Oh,
It's
that's
very
terrific.
it's very cathartic as you've gone through the beginning and had the shit scared out of you. And they also had this amazing moment where they put you through like these like sheets that are, I think, having like fans blown at them from the left and right. So you
Hmm.
kind of have to push through the sheets and like push them out of your way. And one of them is black, and it goes on for what feels like a full minute, where you can see nothing around you. You have
Oh
no
dear.
sense of where this
Uh,
ends, and it was pretty good. Like, yet the wait was terrible. I would have happily paid an extra $15 a ticket to not do any of that, but having done it, goddamn, I forgot what a real haunted house is like.
the VIP pass is an important thing. I learned that a couple of years ago at a they do a barbecue like festival during the summer. One of the main areas in Manhattan. Sam and I usually go. And the first year we went, it was like, oh, we'll just get the regular passes. It's fine. You wait in line, and different barbecue, restaurants want to give you their food for cheap, so you do
Mhm.
it. The lines are like an hour and a half just to get like a pulled pork sandwich. But if you get the VIP pass, which is just literally like maybe $30 more or something, you skip every line and you can just eat like everything, and it was tragic sitting there like watching people just walk up, get a sandwich, and then do that over and over and over again while we're still kind of just barely moving through the line.
Well, it's
Terrible.
one of those things that when you start out, you're like, I don't want to. I'm already getting ripped off. I already
Right.
feel like I'm overpaying. Like I don't want to overpay. But then suddenly you realize once you get in those lines that your time is such a commodity that yes, this would have been. It's not a great analogy, but it's like when you go. I barely go to the movies, right? So when I go to the movies, I want to go balls out. So it's like I'm going to see Gravity. I'm going to go see IMAX 3D. Like I'm going to see it the best I can see it. I'm going to pay too much money because I don't do this very often. And
Right.
I feel like it's the same way with stuff that has lines. Is the lines, the VIP passes are secretly an incredible value.
Yes.
They just don't seem like it up front when it seems like you're paying an extra $20-$30 for the privilege of skipping ahead of people.
I feel like we shouldn't actually be talking about this publicly because soon everyone's going to learn that the
That's
VIP
true.
pass is the value, and then suddenly the VIP passes will be the giant lines, and then every other person will just be able to kind of walk in and we'll be the giant suckers.
That's
how it's going
true.
to end up.
That's true. So we'll get to the games. I played a bunch of games of the weekend. We'll get to that in a second. But
Okay.
I want to head this off with the pass because
Let's do it.
Shit has been crazy this weekend.
And and for the longest time, I did not understand why. I did not understand why at all what was going on. Patrick, recap this a little bit for you for everyone, because I feel like I came into it late and I was super confused by it for most of that time.
I got back from the haunted house at like 3 in the morning and woke up on Sunday, got my coffee, sit down, watching NFL pre-show, and I'm checking my Tumblr, checking my Twitter, and everyone's just like, "Hey man, what's going on? Hey man, what's going on?" I'm like, "Hey man, I don't know." Like, no, I don't know. And so I don't want to get too into the weeds over this stuff, but suffice to say, several members of the media over the weekend were tweeting vaguely about stuff. Cryptic things. Being perfectly honest, I don't know exactly what the issues are for those individuals. One of the things that people should keep in mind when we talk about console launches is that media outlets are bracketed. There is a tiered system. Different outlets are treated differently, which that turns into access. That turns into what they get ahead of time or how much they get of something ahead of time. So that keep that in mind. Like I don't know where we fit in that. I don't know where these other outlets fit in that. But it is something to keep in mind that some outlets are treated differently than others. The reasonings behind that, from what I understand, vary wildly. Depends on, maybe they want to target a certain audience that they think that site is better suited for. They may be targeting more mainstream audience. Like, there's a lot that goes into that stuff. But
Right.
and every outlet also has different things that they use to cover or how they cover or why they cover. Some outlets are very specific about, wanting to have reviews of every game. That's not something that we're aiming for. So I think a lot of things that possibly are a concern to other outlets aren't a concern to us. We want to cover everything. We'd like to have more stuff up, but we kind of go with the flow on that sort of thing. And that's sort of just Giant Bomb in general. Is just sort of, maybe there'd be situations where we'd like to be a little bit differently, but at the end of the day, we'll point a camera at a TV screen if it's not going to work, and
Right.
we'll find a way to make it happen. We're just kind of built that way, but not everyone else is. And other outlets have different aims. But Alex, like you and I were talking, like without getting too much into addressing very specific concerns, like other than one, for example, the only one I will throw water on is this idea that publishers somehow have control over final review text over some games.
That shit was hilarious.
Yeah, there is
hilarious.
There is no way that is true. I have heard
No.
nothing to that. That is never something I have heard to be a legitimate or realistic. I've never even heard that as a demand. I'm not going to say it's never happened, because I guess it's possible.
But this is not
anything's
some
possible.
blanket. This is not some blanket thing that has been mandated upon us for next gen. Like that entire thing was just a giant load. It was a total load of nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. That is ridiculous. And but unfortunately, I can't speak to other people's concerns. All I can say is that it's kind of so far so good on Giant Bomb's end, and any sort of problems that we run into, for more or less, we're going to sort of deal with privately. I guess the one thing I would say that has kind of bothered me, I know that other outlets have, their specific needs, but I don't blame people for getting riled up. I don't blame people for getting upset when all you have to go on are cryptic tweets that don't explain the situation properly, don't give you any sort of context, and when things like that are said in the run-up to a console launch where everything is wild, where everyone is looking for a reason to bash the other side to justify their purchase, where there's not a lot to talk about except all of this bullshit, it's people in the media should be more careful about how they talk about things. And if you want to use your public figure status to leverage companies to give you more access or whatever it is that you need, whatever it is that is not being serviced on your end, you need to be clear with the readers about what exactly that is, because it's frustrating to me where I see that and then have to go through back channels just to figure out what people are upset about. And if I have to do that, then the readers have legitimate reasons to be upset as well. So I don't blame people, even though it's been blown wildly out of proportion. I don't blame people for running with stuff because that's what happens, 3 weeks before a console launches.
Yeah, and especially, when you do leave cryptic messages, that make things sound vaguely apocalyptic, even I don't know that they even are at all, really. You definitely leave room for that kind of speculation to blow up, in your face. And I understand. In my head, I'm imagining that those that were leaving cryptic messages were, not meaning to turn this into a gigantic, public thing. But like you said, that's what happens when you have, a large public following that you are speaking to in the vaguest of vague terms. People get really excited and really obsessed about this stuff, and they are going to talk. They are going to talk, and they are going to come up with the craziest shit you can imagine. And lo and behold, that's exactly what happened, apparently.
And right now, feeding right into the bullshit machine. Like this is why I was two of minds of this before we started the show. Was like, I don't want to do exactly what everyone else is doing, which is what I'm doing right now, which is being vague about vagueness. I'm just feeding into the bullshit machine. But I wanted people to know that I was aware of it, that we were aware of it, that, if we could say more, I guess I would, but it's not my business to speak on behalf of other outlets. All we can say is that, Well,
on top of that, I still don't really know. I mean, honestly, I have like a vague idea of what might be going on. Which, if it is that, then it's not the end of the fucking world. But beyond that, I still don't really know. I think that we have, we've gathered some understandings, but at this point, we're just speculating as much as anyone else. So I think I think we should just end this. I think we should just stop talking about it. It's not even really news.
I think the chat might have crashed. I can't tell.
No, I still got the chat going.
Okay, it disappeared from the front page. So hopefully, there. Okay, I think it was just a weird blip. Anyway, I guess I should say, we'll close this out with. I wish I could be more specific. I guess what I would say is if all this stuff made you worried about your pre-orders, I don't think there's any reason to be any more freaked out than you were before the weekend started. I don't think there are any fatal flaws in either machine that I'm aware of that you should somehow be afraid of. The strengths and flaws of these machines before we can get our hands on the final product continue to be as they stand. Yeah. And we can't. It's hard to say more until we. And that's also feeding into the bullshit machine, we're so close at this point, it can be a little frustrating, I think, for all people on all sides because, we just want to get those machines and see what this thing actually is.
Yeah. For our part, we're not really that worried about shit right now. We're just ready for the consoles to show up so we can just start doing our thing. That's it. Yeah. That's all we got.
Sounds like we're going to be covered on our end, and that's all we can really do until we get closer to being actually to do anything with that stuff. All right, so that aside, I just wanted to get that out of the way early. So people keep that in mind if you when you're asking questions later in the chat. You can ask, but for the most part, I think we're gonna kind of put that topic to bed. But feel free to ask anything else in the comments. Did you
Yes.
play anything this weekend? I know you said
Uh,
WWE's embargo is up or something like
It
that.
is up as of this morning. I did play a little more over the weekend. Mostly this weekend was spent going to Halloween parties, watching football, and kind of doing things other than video games. But yeah, 2K14 is out tomorrow. They moved the embargo. Originally it was tomorrow, but they moved it to today, so I will have that review by the end of the day today. There are a few up on the web already by especially dedicated people like, say, Dan Reichert. I will. I will say that for my part, I spent the better part of last week playing through 2K14. It's and I will say that I enjoyed it for the most part. I think it's a pretty good game. It is not as impressive or exciting necessarily as what last year's game was, mostly because last year's story mode edition, the whole Attitude Era thing, was kind of like a nice surprise. It was something different and kind of new. This just sort of builds off that. It takes a lot of the, the whole thing is 30 years of WrestleMania, so it's just, matches across the WrestleMania landscape, done with the same methodology that they used for the Attitude Era stuff. So it's a much wider swath, and, it's a much longer period of time they're trying to cover. But there's some good stuff in there. There's a lot of good matches that people remember as being classics, as well as, like, a few revisionist history classics.
Okay.
Like, stuff. The WWE is very much about revisionist history. It's about, going back and saying something was great even though everyone clearly hated it at the time. Like, you go back and watch the footage, everyone's booing not because they hate the people in the ring, but because they hate what's going on.
Okay.
So there are matches in this game like that are things that people genuinely super hated when they happen, but they are presented as like these big classic moments, in WWE history, which is sort of annoying, I guess. But that's just kind of the way of things with the WWE and their method of storytelling. So there are a few duds in there, but for the most part, I think it's a really good collection of, historical content. The only other issue is that it otherwise hasn't changed a whole lot. It's kind of last year's game with some AI fixes here and there, and some additional moves and a few tweaks to some of the various extra modes and stuff, but for the most part, it's kind of last year's game, just fixed in a few key ways and then built out for the 30 years of WrestleMania stuff, and that's about it. But despite that, I did enjoy it because I thought last year's game was pretty good, and this year's game is pretty good too. It just hasn't moved forward in a serious, meaningful way, and that's not really surprising considering they changed publishers. It's their last year on current gen. There's like a lot of things that have kind of been lingering for a while that clearly weren't going to get fixed this year, because at some point they're going to have to change over to the new hardware, and they're going to have to make a lot of bigger changes, hopefully, to this game to kind of make it something a little bit more palatable to whatever the next generation of hardware is capable of. So, for my part, I think this is a totally decent, kind of last end for the generation for this franchise, but man, I am really hoping they do something kind of drastic and different next year, because I don't think another game just like this one, but looking slightly better, is going to cut it exactly. You know what I mean?
Daro in the chat asks, does the game still have the reversal problem?
If he's talking about the endless series of reversals, the ones where like people would just get into these long loops of constantly reversing moves, it's not nearly as bad. They changed the reversals so that a lot of them, like, once you reverse a move, it just does another move. It doesn't go into another hold, so you're not constantly, shifting back and forth between grapple to grapple to grapple endlessly. It's not perfect. There are still, like, weird AI loops and occasional things that get kind of broken, but it's not nearly as broken as last year's game could be when it came to that stuff.
Someone asked me on Twitter a relevant wrestling question. It's Kip Casper asks, ask Alex, after last night's third pay-per-view fuck finish in a row, is he done with the WWE for a bit? What's a fuck finish?
A fuck finish is like a screw job, or a wrestler people like getting screwed over at the end of a big match kind of thing. Okay. I mean, that's not official terminology. I think he made it like that sounds like the kind of thing like some like random Swedish metalhead would come up. It's a fuck finish, man. But no, I'm not. I kind of expected it. I kind of expected the way that pay-per-view ended was going to be the way it ended. we'll talk about that more on the Power Bombcast this week, which we are scheduled to record.
Hey, look at that. There you go.
Yeah, good little plug moment in there. But no, I look, I wasn't thrilled, but at the same time, it was exactly what I was expecting. I didn't even watch the pay-per-view because I don't like spending $60 every month to watch what I don't think are going to necessarily be great shows. So no, I'm not done. I'm curious to see what they do on the show tonight because I feel like how they handle it tonight is going to determine whether or not I'm okay with the way last night's thing finished, which tends to be how a lot of this pay-per-view stuff it goes. Like, how are they going to progress the storyline past whatever big dumb thing they did on the show is usually what keeps me interested. The big dumb things are less interesting than the way they progress the big dumb things afterward, if you know what I mean.
Right.
So that was a lot of wrestling talk to you, Patrick, who doesn't watch wrestling or really know or really care all that much, which I totally understand.
I interview people about subjects I don't understand all the time. Wrestling is just another one on top. So did you play anything else, or is that all you're playing because you were playing that for review stuff?
That was pretty much it. I dived back into Animal Crossing very briefly this weekend just to kind of see if anything
Halloween stuff.
I think there's stuff on Halloween. There wasn't really much going on when I was in there on Saturday, but mostly my girlfriend had been running our town. She was our mayor, and she was kind of keeping track of things. She stopped over the last couple weeks. Things are looking a little scary there. A lot of weeds. We've lost a couple of people. It's like I think both of us are starting to realize that we may have just abandoned our town at this point.
Yeah, just move on. Just pull Detroit and just say, "Oh, not my fault."
Fuck it, we're out. We are out.
I played a fair amount of Puppeteer.
How is that?
I got around to. Not as good as I'd hoped. That I came out of E3 extremely. I think both of us came out really excited for that game.
I was into it. I was into what I saw, but I've never been entirely sure what to make of that game, just like mechanically.
It's not a particularly good platformer. I wouldn't say it's as far gone as Little Big Planet, which was a game that I think was incredibly creative, but almost completely broken as a platformer, and sort of got away with murder in that respect. I just never could. Floaty physics are okay, but that game's physics not great. But anyway, and Puppeteer as well. Let me start with the stuff that I really liked, which is that in 3D, oh my god, like unbelievable how good this game looks in 3D. Like it's, the storybook nature, the way they like the sort of, I guess, papercraft. I don't know how you would describe the visual style of the game, but it looks. It's just like constantly. Like I was actually saying, like wow. Like it looks really, really good in 3D, and they actually talked up the 3D before it came out and said they were doing some weird tricks, and I don't know what they did, but if you have a 3D TV and there's really not that many reasons to use it on games, this is a game. Not. This is a game that maybe down the line, if you pick, it was already I think $40, so it'll probably head to cheapville pretty quickly. It's an excellent reason to use the 3D on your TV, and I just kind of wish it was wrapped up in a better game. And part of it is that the game, it has a narrative, and man, it gets really wrapped up in telling it for like these cutscenes that go on for 5 to 10 minutes, but they don't actually say anything. There's not actually that much of a story happening. It's just it's very elaborate for the sake of being elaborate, and the art's beautiful, and it's really nice to look at, but at some point you just kind of wish you would get back to the game, but then you get back to the game, and the game just doesn't make very great use of the mechanics it has. Like you start out pretty simple, where you're just jumping and you're getting these masks, but the masks don't unlock any powers. The masks are purely aesthetic, and if you hit down on the D-pad, you can do like different little dances and stuff like that, and those are cute. But the powers are actual sort of actual physical power-ups that you're picking up at the end of stages. So you get like a shield that you can block things and a bomb you can throw. And at least so far, I finished 2 acts of the game. You get these power-ups, but you almost never have to use them except in like very, very specific situations. It just feels like the game is giving you more to do without giving you very much to do with them. Right. And it stands in stark contrast to I'm putting you up against a titan like Mario is difficult, but when those games exist, it's hard not to think about them in those terms. And it's like when you get something in Mario, like you have very specific and plentiful uses for that power up. There are
Right.
reasons that the developers put them in the game, and in Puppeteer, it often feels like they're giving you new options just because this is what these games do, right? Like now you can throw bombs, and it doesn't feel very meaningful. It feels very tacked on, and when you combine that with the platforming not feeling that great, and the masks being neat, but not all that together impactful. The only thing that they do is unlock bonus stages. So
Right.
if you have a particular mask at a particular point in the stage, then you can use that mask and then go to a bonus stage. But it definitely feels like a game that is very much style over substance, and for a platformer, that is a tough thing to stomach, because I feel like
Sure.
platformers are very much all about the substance of the platforming and the level design and the enemies, and the Puppeteer just doesn't have a whole lot of that.
Yeah,
I think
you can make. I was saying you can make the prettiest platformer in the world. It doesn't matter a goddamn lick if like the jumping doesn't feel good, if the the level designs aren't attuned to whatever mechanics they are putting in front of you. I mean, if those Rayman games were a little bit floatier or a little bit more aggressively frustrating in the level design, they would suffer massively because of it, no matter how good they look.
Yeah, and so definitely a game. I think probably the way to look at Puppeteer is, especially if you have a PlayStation Plus subscription, this seems like one of those games that at one point will either go just straight up free. Well, I just rewind. I am surprised this is even a retail game. Like
Sure.
I think it shocked me when I found out from Sony when I was like, hey, I'd like to check out Puppeteer. I feel like it's gonna be one of those games that's gonna be kind of overlooked and it's kind of up my alley. And they were like, oh yeah, well we have retail copies. I was like, retail copies? Like what? It doesn't make sense that this game. Platformers at retail are a really dumb idea unless you're one of the big franchises. And we saw how Rayman Legends went. It's a tough market to get into.
Sure.
So this game should have been just straight up downloadable from the beginning. $40, tough proposition, even though it seems like it's about 8 hours. So there's a lot of value, but
Yeah, especially if you're going to charge less money at this point, it does seem kind of unnecessary to throw that out there to retail. Like, I don't really know what I'm sure there's someone somewhere in an office that is crunching numbers and is, making decisions on whether it makes more sense to throw it out at retail or not. I don't know what any of that reasoning could possibly be. But I'm sure there is a reason for it that we just don't understand.
Yeah. So keep an eye on it, especially if a 3D TV. I think it's very pretty, and especially if it somehow goes free on PlayStation Plus. Would be well worth checking out just for that. But
I'm actually kind of surprised you have a 3D TV, to be honest.
My mom does. Like,
okay.
and not because she cares about 3D. It's just that when my parents bought a TV to upgrade, like 2 or 3 years ago, they were just like, well, we buy a TV every 10, 15 years. Give us something really nice. And
Sure.
I think also at this point, most TVs that you're buying over a certain price point are just 3D at this point. It's
They
just one of those
built in.
It's just one of those ubiquitous features that I think if you're paying over $800, you're just going to get that in your TV, which is sort of in the long term. If 3D is going to get any sort of actual deep penetration, that's sort of the way it was going to have to work. Was just people got it, and they weren't actually seeking it out. Oh, I guess people are saying in the chat that Puppeteer is on sale this week, starting Tuesday, $25 or less. That seems much more palatable.
I would play that game for $25, totally.
Yeah. So that's
and
that.
I will.
I played Puppeteer. We'll see if I get back to that. I'd like to see some.
There's something else you were talking about. I remember seeing on the Twitter over the weekend.
Device 6.
Yeah, tell me more about this, because I don't know a whole lot about Device 6.
Device 6 is the newest game from Simogo Games. They made Your Walk.
Right.
Which was an excellent game that came out this year that if you have not played Your Walk, go back and play that first. It's also excellent. They also made before that Beat Sneak Bandit, which people might be familiar with, which is another pretty decent sort of action puzzle game for iOS devices. And Device 6, man, tough to describe. So it's nothing like anything else that Simogo has worked on before, only in the sense that it uses uses your devices in very interesting ways. So Device 6, it sort of opens like a book. You've got text, and you are scrolling through the text, and there's like music and sound effects that are kind of going off as you're scrolling through the text to kind of generate a sense of atmosphere. So like, if you're reading like, oh, and then she proceeded down the stairs, you hear like clunk, 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 clunk. And if like, oh, and then she turned the corner and da-da, like there'll be music to go with that. And it's all perfectly timed with how you are scrolling. So like it's aware of how you are moving through the text and reading the text, so that when those moments do occur, it happen, like they're able to make the triggers happen in the way that like when you would play an actual like 3D game where like you just like cross a certain threshold with the character, triggers something. This is like as you cross a threshold with your finger, it triggers something, and it's very well done. So much of the game is built on surprise that I am reluctant to say anything except to say people should just take my word for it. But what it does do is it's sort of it's a novel with puzzles, and it's really crazy. There's really like it's a really tough game. Like I'm considering trying to write a review of it today, mostly as an exercise, because I don't even know how you talk about this game without getting into some really crazy territory. But I will say that it's the first game since Fez that in order to solve its puzzles, I had a notebook out, and it's just I could show you 6 pages of just complete goddamn nonsense. Like it doesn't, and then it encourages, similar to Fez, an overanalyzation of the evidence in front of you, when it turns out the solutions are pretty banal. But the way that the puzzles are structured encourages you to just think about it way too much. But when you actually solve the puzzles, it's like, oh, okay, I get how this works. And it's a lot of fun, and it's got a really great little story that it tells. Probably would take you about an afternoon to finish. It's kind of split into 6 chapters. It's a game that makes you feel really smart. And
this is an iOS thing, right?
It's an iOS thing.
Okay.
I played an iPad, but I've heard from folks that the iPhone version is kind of the way to go, because you actually spend a lot of time. So the text will kind of start out like a book, and then it will start encouraging you, like, oh, and she took a left. So you actually physically rotate the device to follow the text. And so a phone, especially when you start solving the puzzles, you're going to be going back and forth through what you've seen previously. Like rotating an iPhone is just easier than rotating an iPad. Especially if you got a big iPad, those things are kind of heavy and can get kind of cumbersome to do. So it's not a horror game. It's more of like a mystery novel, I guess is how I would present it. Your walk had some horror elements, and yeah, I would just say it's really tough, because I want to say more, but to say anything more would to say too much about the game. So Device 6, it's only a couple of bucks. Highly recommended. Had so much fun with it. So I think people should check it out.
Into it. I will definitely check that one out. I still need to check out Your Walk too. Everyone is you have raved about that thing for a while, and I need to check that out.
Finish Your Walk before the year is over, is what I will say.
I will do that. I will play through that before the end of the year.
It's very short. It's like 2.5 hours at most.
I got like 3 hours. I can do it.
Okay. All right. Let's see. There is some news that we can cover before if people want
like actual news.
I would say topics.
Okay.
So if you want to start jumping into the chat and throwing us some questions, we'll get to some of those after we touch on some of this.
But to be clear, these are topics that we can actually talk about. These are things that we can actually say to people publicly.
Yes.
Clearly. Okay.
Mortal Kombat film director steps aside to avoid a creative fatality. Joystick, don't write headlines like that. Don't do that. I don't know. I didn't watch. Did you watch any of this Mortal Kombat Legacy stuff?
I watched a little bit. I watched a little bit of the first season. It didn't do a whole lot for me, but it was definitely like way better produced than you really seemed like. It seemed like it had any right to be. I haven't watched any of the second season stuff at all. I wasn't really too aware of what was going on with this new movie, other than I'd heard some rumblings that it might be happening. I don't know a whole lot about the guy who is the director that did this. So I don't really know. I don't have a whole lot of feelings about one way or the other about all this stuff. I will say that the first few episodes of the original Legacy series are not a thing that I really want to watch on a regular basis, but surprisingly competent and well made for a low budget, what almost looked like a fan thing, when it started out. So I think you should actually check those out at some point. They're kind of interesting.
Here's the better question, the more pertinent question. What do you think of the original Mortal Kombat movie?
I watched it again like 2-3 years ago, just when it was on TV, I remember saying to myself, okay, I want to see if this actually holds up at all. It doesn't especially well, but it is still one of the more basically entertaining, competent video game adaptation movies I've ever seen.
I think it holds up better than you would think it would, even if it
Sure.
doesn't hold up that well.
Yeah, it's not a great movie, certainly, and some of it looks really 90s dated in a way that only cheap 90s movies can look.
Well, I mean, hey, wait. Reptile looked badass when that movie came out. Those effects do
Rubber
not
Goro.
hold. The effects
Rubber
do not.
Goro.
I think
Rubber Goro.
I think Rubber Goro.
Rubber Goro.
I think it looks pretty
Rubber
awesome.
Goro.
I think it looks even
Rubber
better.
Goro. Rubber
I think
Goro. Rubber Goro.
looks even better in 2013 than it looked before. But I think
All right.
stuff like Reptile. I mean, it looked. I remember, I was pretty young at the time when that movie came out, but it looked amazing at the time. But it's just one of those things that those kinds of sort of cutting edge effects are just gonna look like there's just nothing you can do. You either have to give it the Star Trek treatment and go back and redo those effects, later. But there's just no way for that stuff to hold up when you're dealing with like almost a pure CGI creature. But I think that movie was legitimately pretty funny. I really enjoyed it. Like it took itself about as seriously as a Mortal Kombat film should, I think.
Sure.
Which is to say that I think the games take themselves a little more seriously than they should, and that movie struck a pretty appropriate, I think, B-movie tone, which was like, yeah, this is goofy, but also like the actors, I think, sort of elevated the content in certain ways. Like Raiden was so much fun. Like
when it was who was it? It was
Christopher Lambert. Lambert, is that how you say it? Okay.
I don't know. That's how I like saying
Lambert.
it. But yeah, no, he was fun in it. The guy, it was I forget. Raiden was the only character they recast in the second one, I think.
Yeah, because he was probably like, yeah, pay me more money. And then then you saw it too, and it was like, oh god, do it so bad.
I can never remember the name of it. James Remar. James Remar was the one they got for the second one, and he was definitely not as entertaining or fun as Christopher Lambert was in the first one. God, that second movie. Oh god. Oh.
Annihilation.
Yeah. Oh, that's a real bad movie. That's a real.
It was one of those movies that even when I was younger, when I saw it, when you're young, it's kind of hard to tell if a movie is bad. Like you just don't have enough of a palate to sort of like make that judgment call. And Annihilation was, I walked out of that going, that movie sucked. Like other than seeing like the really lame sort of nods to the franchise, like a friendship.
Oh, they were really bad. They were really bad.
They did a bestiality, or is that what those were called? Animality.
Animality.
Bestiality.
Yeah, God, there was a lot of really bad, just cheap, awful shit in that movie. I remember I saw that movie in theaters with my dad because we were in that divorced father-son thing where we would do every other weekend. We would, have lunch and then go see something.
Oh, and you had to go see that movie?
And there was nothing else out that weekend. And I somehow was like, let's just go see this, whatever. It'll probably be not very good. And then he and I walked out, and I was just like, I am so sorry. I am so sorry that I put you through that. He looked shell-shocked. He looked absolutely shell-shocked by the fact that I had dragged him to this fucking awful Mortal Kombat sequel.
Damn.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I brought that up purely so we could talk about
That's
Mortal
fair.
Kombat. Let's see. Oh, so the other thing I wanted to talk about, so you played the Stanley Parable. I played the Stanley Parable. People have brought this up in my Tumblr, and I think it's worth bringing up because it touches on some subjects that we've talked about in the past. But so there are these slides in the game that depicted I haven't seen it in the game, so I have to refresh my memory on what exactly it was. I don't know. It was basically like so I'll pull up the joystick story. It says, within the video, slides show a white man interacting with an impoverished black child from a third world country. In one slide, he's giving the child a cigarette. Another shows him setting the child on fire. And there was someone brought that up as a criticism, and said that they were, looking to show the game in their class, and they thought this was inappropriate. And Davey Rendon, who's one of the designers of the game, responded saying, you know what, I think you're right. I think that you have a point, and although he can't change the voices in the game, he can change the slides, and there's a fix coming. I guess a patch, I should say. A fix is maybe the wrong word for that.
Sure.
To address that. And so this brought up, people asking me about, what is the role of, is this censorship, I guess? And I don't think this is. I think this is a case of a designer soliciting feedback, looking at that feedback, saying, hey, this is legitimate. This is something that, I didn't think about. and I'm going to change it and sort of case closed.
Yeah. I don't think this is censorship. I think it's censorship if he was somehow being forced or cajoled into doing it, against his will. But I mean, if he's just taking the feedback and going, yeah, I don't really like it either, that you're right, and just changing it, then that's fine. He's the artist, so to speak. He is welcome to do whatever he wants to, his own game, and if he feels like that thing is inappropriate. I mean, for me, it doesn't bother me at all because, I mean, whatever, kids on fire. But, other people might be offended by that, and that's fine. If he doesn't think it's, integral to being in the game and, he doesn't want to, off-put people, then by all means, change it. Who cares? Do what you got to do is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think it's basically sort of a non-story because the designer's not being forced to this. The game has been extremely successful. Had he changed this, or not changed it, the game would have still been. I mean, like, it's just. Yeah, I just found it odd that people were like, "Oh, this is this is what happens when, political correctness sort of takes over designs and forces designers to do things against their will." And it's like, I don't think this is called feedback, and then this is called the designer looking at that and saying, this is a legitimate concern, or this isn't, and I'm willing to address this, or I'm not willing to address this, and I don't see the issue. Like
I don't either. Oh, no.
Brendan actually...
Oh, there you go.
Oh, did I disappear?
Sorry, you froze up there for a second.
Yeah, that happens to you too. You just gotta roll with it eventually. And I think Davey Rendon addressed it, perfectly fine on Twitter, where someone asked like, "Hey, that's censorship, man. Don't do that." And he was like, "I'm the designer. I get to choose. What does and doesn't go in the game." And I think that's exactly how that should play out. People. If the designer says that makes sense, they make those changes, because all this stuff happens behind the scenes. This happens before the game comes out.
Yeah.
You write something that doesn't work or maybe is offensive, and it gets changed before the game comes out. I don't see it being all that different when the game actually is released, except that we get to see and sort of judge whether we think it's appropriate as well. But ultimately, the designer gets to choose that.
Yeah, and if it were, in any way like some huge part of the game or something, I could see like there being more uproar. But it's like a tiny slide in like a small part of this compartment of the game. Like, it really doesn't have any huge bearing on the experience. Oh.
Video games, right?
Video games. You are locking up like crazy over there, man.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I don't know.
I can hear you fine. Like, your audio is actually coming through like totally normal. It's just your face. And you're still sitting there, just kind of doing nothing, just a blank stare on your face. Oh, this is all going to end horribly, isn't it? This is the end. This is the end of Bombin the AM, Scoops and the Wolf.
Falling apart, Alex.
There you are. Oh God, you're back.
We'll just keep rolling.
Let's just roll with it.
Yeah. Your network connection is experiencing difficulties. Check your connectivity. I don't know if that's me. Google Plus. I'm hardwired. That shit don't happen when you're hardwired. Let's see. Anthony Adam 222 asks, "Are you guys going to play any of the big new releases this week? Battlefield 4, Assassin's Creed 4, or both?"
I may jump into Battlefield 4 at some point. I haven't messed with the beta at all. I haven't really done much of anything with Battlefield since 3 first came out. I've never been the biggest fan of multiplayer war games. Not as much my thing, but I'm always curious just to kind of mess around in those things and see how they go for me, which is usually poorly. So I'll try that out. I'm not so sure about AC4 yet. I kind of want to see where people come out on that one before I make a decision as to whether I'm going to play it or not. 3 did not do a whole lot for me, and after reviewing that, Liberation, and playing through some of that, I'm like maybe a little Assassin's Creeded out at the moment. But if people have really nice things to say about this one, I'm certainly open to giving it a shot. How about you, Patrick?
I'm gonna wait.
You're gonna wait? Yeah. You're gonna wait?
The stream is falling apart. The stream
It
is
is
falling
falling
apart.
apart. It's just a nightmare. I don't even know what's happening anymore. Well, we had a nice show once.
We did.
It's good.
We did. I don't know. Google Plus. I thought you were supposed to be better than Skype. Google Plus. I thought you were better
Lots
than
of things
this.
are supposed to be better than Skype, but they rarely are.
All right. Well,
You're okay
we're not-
now. You're talking.
we're not-
You're good. I can see you.
Eh,
See, there you go. You froze again. This is a mess. Well, this is the part where I would normally have to fill time, wouldn't I?
Yep.
Not very good at doing that, unfortunately.
Just awoo. Just do an awoo.
Ow! I'm just gonna keep doing this until you